Welcome to the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. I'm Kate Campbell-Stevenson. I'm the Cultural Ambassador to the Center, and I'm the new host for Her Story. Each episode will feature amazing Maryland women who have really led the way here in our state. These women come from different areas of life, but we feel their stories will add to our understanding and support our motto here at the Center, how we can add her story to history to make our story. Our featured woman today is Linda Shevitz. We have a great show, so stay with us and we'll be right back.
Current updates. And Linda Shevitz, who introduced me originally, is the Title IX person and Miss Educational Equity for the entire state of Maryland, and who I have to announce in case everyone doesn't know, just received the National Award from the National Association for Multicultural Education. For her educational equity advocacy and work all these years. So it was well-deserved, and we're very proud that Linda finally was honored at the national level in that way. So,
good morning. I always hate to follow Jill because, well, there's very little I can add. And it's a privilege to be here. Many times that I'm able to walk across the street. I learn every time I come. Also, I was so proud to work with our wonderful Linda Shevitz. And I was going to mention that national award, but Jill stole it. I'm so proud of Linda, and it's a privilege to work with her every day. And she always manages to clue me in on these things, and I get to...
Welcome back. I'm so happy to be sharing this information about Linda Shevitz. I'm so proud today to take you to the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame, where Linda Shevitz has just been inducted into that wonderful group of women leaders here in Maryland.
I want to congratulate all of you because it's really quite remarkable what you've been able to accomplish. So now it is my great privilege to introduce my friend and colleague, I can't believe I'm saying this, of more than 25 years, Linda Pollock Shevitz. As an inductee to the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame for 2013, Linda brings to this well-deserved honor a passion, commitment, and spirit as an advocate for educational equity and social justice. Picture a student, whether it is a Muslim student in Frederick, an African-American child in Cambridge, a high school youngster with disabilities in Silver Spring, a group of girls in a Baltimore City middle school, a Latino boy in St. Mary's County. Linda has worked tirelessly to generate enduring programs and policies which have helped them all learn in a safe, welcoming environment. She is their advocate. Linda is a native Marylander. She went to public schools in Silver Spring and attended the University of Maryland as an undergraduate and graduate student. She is a total Terp.
And a Redskin.
That's right, and a Redskin fan, sorry. As the Educational Equity Specialist at the Maryland State Department of Education for more than 30 years, and currently as the Director of the Equity Assurance and Compliance Office, she has worked with every school district in Maryland to eliminate discrimination. Linda's work throughout Maryland has served as a model for educators in virtually every other state. At the national level, she served as president of AGILE, the Association for Gender Equity, Leadership, and Education, and a leader in the National Coalition for Gender Equity and Education. This year, Linda was honored by one of our country's most important professional communities, the National Association for Multicultural Education, receiving the National Equity and Social Justice Advocacy Award. Linda is is a visionary with a practitioner's nature. It is this combination that has enabled her to achieve at the highest level. Whether it is through her leadership of the Maryland Women's History Project or our Maryland Women's Heritage Center, the first of its kind in the nation, or COVE, the Maryland's Coalition Opposed to Violence and Extremism. Anything is possible as long as Linda is involved. But for all the accolades, none of which we would put to music in the way that Linda would so easily. It is Linda's quiet and loving nature, the humility with which she does her dedicated work, and the respect that Linda shows to all who know her that deserve our gratitude. Add to this her fierce commitment and love for her family, Steve, Beth, Ari, and her delicious grandson, David. Her extended family and friends. These are the qualities that touch our hearts and minds. Inducting Linda into the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame gives deserved recognition for all she has done, and I know will continue to do. But even more so, her induction brings sustained honor to the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm so happy to be sharing this information about Linda Shevitz. She's an amazing woman who's been a tremendous influence on my life. She is a leader in equity issues throughout the United States and a trailblazer in leading the way for women. We'll be right back.
One thing, as far as MSD and Title IX, just to say we have a Title IX coordinator in every school system. We communicate regularly. We have training for them. But there's still a long way to go. Most of them send back surveys. Less than 10% of their time is spent on Title IX. No budget whatsoever. A lot of them, nobody else in the school system works with them. Some of them have special instruction, whatever. So we, follow up from MSD, but we need a lot of help in that arena. In the National Coalition for Women and Girls in Education, you got one of these in your packet. It tells a lot. I do want to say that 40 years. I've never seen Title IX get so much attention. There was a reception at the White House. There was a reception in Congress. I have over there a whole book of articles that appeared, and books like Susan Klein that did the Achieving Gender Equity Through Education Handbook. In terms of Title IX statewide, all of you have just been incredible, and of course the Heritage Center is very proud to be a part of that.
Linda has led the way for Maryland women in understanding how important it is to know our stories, to know women's history, so we can learn from these women and how we can be inspired by their stories. Through her efforts, she's provided information to schools throughout the state of Maryland about what women have really accomplished here in Maryland for generations.
As so many people have said, none of us do this alone, and there's so many people that I want to thank that I won't be able to mention everyone's names, but I have to thank Susan and Jill, who have been friends and are friends and colleagues and mentors and role models and support systems, and just have been incredible working with for, I thought it was closer to 30 years. It's really an honor to be part of the inductees this year and in past years, and also in present years and future years, as I know it will be. I want to say a quote from Lucille Clifton, who is our Poet Laureate of Maryland and an award-winning illustrator and writer. I need to know their names, those women I have walked with, all those women who could have known me. Where in the world are their names? Well, one of the ways we've saved their names and honored their names is through the creation of the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame, and we want to thank the women legislators and the Commission for Women for doing that. The other names that we want to remember at the Maryland Women's Heritage Center, we have an Unsung Heroines group, and we want to remember all of their names too. And these are people that have helped our families and our communities and our society become a better place. Before I give some thanks to particular organizations, I want to tell a few anecdotes about the 3 areas that were mentioned in Susan's introduction. One was working as the Title IX coordinator, the federal law that prohibits sex discrimination in education and in gender equity. The other was women's history, and the third was social justice and multicultural education. A few Title IX stories. Janet Reno and Ruth Bader Ginsburg spoke at the Department of Justice, and they were talking about women in the law. And they were both denied admission to several law schools. Title IX hadn't been passed yet. One of the things is access to education. So they said, both of them, they told us we could never be lawyers, but they didn't tell us that we could never be Supreme Court justices. The other area that Title IX covers is sexual harassment, and thousands of people have been trained in combating sexual harassment and making sure it doesn't happen again. But there was only, Title IX was only seen as preventing sexual harassment of students by adults, until a Maryland woman, Verna Williams, who was a lawyer, was chosen as the second African-American woman in the United States to be the primary arguer of a Supreme Court case, which was seeing if Title IX should also cover sexual harassment of students by students. She won the case, and again, the impact on students across the country, looking not just at what happened with adults, but what happens student to students, was crucial. The third area which got the most publicity of anything was athletics. And we all know, we hear all the stories about women who couldn't be athletics and never had teams. And Hillary Clinton shared that when she was in high school, girls only played half-court basketball, and she asked her teacher why, and he said, because girls aren't strong enough to play football basketball. But my favorite story, I'm looking at my daughter Beth, she was in 7th grade, and her phys ed teacher told her that all the girls should sit on the sidelines and watch the boys play soccer because they were better athletes and better soccer players. After this, she went up to him and she said, you know, not only is that unfair, but it's illegal under Title IX. And my mother can give you a workshop. And of course, this led to more things like Dominique Dawes becoming one of the first people to win a gold medal in the Olympics, both as a team member and as an individual. And she was recently named this year by President Obama as the White House Council on Physical Fitness and Health. He appointed 2 people, and she is one of the 2 and has traveled all over the country talking to young people about the importance of physical education and athletics. There also, for the first time, were more American women in the Olympics this year than men, which was quite a change. And the second area is women's history. Well, in the Women's History Project and the Maryland Women's History Project, both nationally and in the state, started in the early 1980s. Jill Greenberg was the founder, and then I was lucky enough to adopt it when I started working at the Maryland State Department of Education in 1982. The reason we were doing this, one of the reasons was at that time we had looked at some history books, 700-page high school history books. How many pages do you think mention women? 43 out of 700. That was one reason. The other one, students were asked to report on their unit on the history of Maryland in school. And Alexa Champion, who was age 8 at the time, wrote an essay, and she was invited to Governor Hughes's mansion to report out on Women's History Month. And what she said was, I especially enjoyed studying Mary Young Pickersgill, who you met earlier today, who made the Star Spangled Banner. But I wonder why we studied 1 woman and 3 men. Why don't you have 3 men and 3 women if you want to have interesting lessons? Remember, there are other women who made important contributions. If we study mostly men, then it looks like the women didn't do anything. She also pointed out they didn't study people from a variety of races. This was age 8, Alexa Champion. The other example, at age 14, one of the women that we featured, young women, we were looking at young women leaders because the Maryland State Department of Education and the Commission for Women for 20 years produced a packet that went to every school in the state honoring women in an area, women in the arts, women in the sciences, women in politics, women in law and government. We decided to do one honoring young women leaders. Sierra Myers, who was age 14, she had her own business cards. She considered herself a motivational speaker and a leader in writing and motivational speaker. And I know you can't see her way in the back, but she created a magazine called Do Rag where she featured students' poetry, and her interests were, believe it or not, at age 14, civil rights, human rights, friendship, and relationships. She wrote a poem called Standing Tall, which she read when she came to be honored at the State Department of Education. Just want to read 2 short verses of that to show you the importance of women's history. Dealing with the trials of life is the one thing that makes us who we are. We are created equally, being both from near and far. Different shades of skin on the outside, but beautiful personalities within. No one can really justify what makes women so unique. We have climbed the mountains and have even fallen in the dark. We still have our pride and will never fall apart. Yes, my sisters, you have been through it all, but I still see you standing tall. And that was her motto. The third area is that of social justice and equity, and educational equity and equity in general society. The Maryland State Department of Education had established an office called the Office of Equity, Assurance, and Compliance. There are a few people out there that have been that or were in the office. And it was mid-1970s when it was created. It has done discrimination complaints both through the department and helped out in all the 24 school systems to have policies. And what this is the intersection of all the areas of equity. It's gender, it's race, it's national origin, it's disability, it's sexual orientation, economics, efforts to assure that there's equity in education for all of our students, to respect their abilities to achieve both socially, personally, and academically. Some of the organizations I just want to mention to thank, the Mid-Atlantic Equity Center that Susan talked about, and also the Maryland Multicultural Coalition and an Education That's Multicultural Network where 24 school systems send people once a month. The last thing I want to do is to thank my family and friends who have been incredible. And also to mention there's some family members here that have traveled from out of state, and a friends group called the Wild Women Writers Group who also have traveled from out of state. But my deepest thanks goes to my family. My grandparents who were escaping anti-Semitism early in the 1900s and coming to America for a better life, Sam and Rebecca. My parents, Dorothy and Harry Pollack, who instilled in us love of family and appreciation for all cultures. My daughter Beth, whose love of family and passion for teaching have touched the lives of many of her students, and she emphasizes social justice and global issues in her teaching. My grandson, who I want to stand up. My grandson David, Beth and Ari's son. For those of us that are grandparents, we know how much energy they bring to our lives. His caring nature, he's 6 years old, almost 7. He's enriched our lives through his energy, his enthusiasm, his curiosity, and his humor. And most of all, for some 50 years now, my husband Steve, whose love, his commitment, his understanding, his unconditional support has been the mainstay of my life these 50 years, both personally and professionally. And I'd like to close now, but I would like my daughter and son-in-law Ari and David and Steve to come up. Thank you all.
Good side. Wait a minute.
Wasn't that inspiring? We'll be right back.
I want to say that last year, our board here was the history of women and civil rights in Maryland. And Phyllis was on a panel last year for all the work that she had done for Title IX and gender equity. Okay, I'm just going to say, I've heard Bernice speak so many times, and I know I learn so much every time, and what a role model and mentor she's been for all of us. But one thing that she said that was so true about the legislation, I was a judge for National History Day, and a student from Michigan, an 8th grader, had done her project on Title IX. And her parents and grandparents had never been admitted, her mothers, to nursing, to medical school or law school. So I said, what's the one thing that you learned most about Title IX? She said, I used to think when they passed federal law that everybody just obeyed it. And I learned you have to file a lawsuit. Oh. So it's still happening. Bernice, before the panel comes up, Susan's going to introduce, there's a Passing the Torch that came out, it says years ago. Yeah, 1995 Women's Right to Vote anniversary. And I would like you to just pass it to the pioneers, and Susan will introduce the panelists.
Okay, thank you.
Our featured woman today is Linda Shevitz, one of the founders of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center.
Hi, we're with Linda Shevitz today. Linda is with the Maryland State Department of Education, but she's been a national leader on issues of gender equity and prejudice reduction, and she's being inducted today into the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a real honor and privilege.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about maybe what in your life might have led you to these wonderful achievements?
I think from the very beginning, I was very active in school and different activities. And then in high school, I became real active with the B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, which did a lot of civil rights work and a lot of citizenship work and community work. And I think that kind of sparked me. I became active on the national level, went to the national conference, went to an international conference in Israel for 6 weeks. And our focus was really on civil and human rights. And that's what kind of got me really dedicated.
Yeah, and you never left that dedication.
No.
Would you talk a little bit about the work that you've done on women's history, because the Hall of Fame is obviously a great example of that. We know that you coordinated the Maryland Women's History Project and are program director for the Maryland Women's Heritage Center.
Yes, I was lucky when I started working at the Maryland State Department of Education. Jill Moss Greenberg had started and initiated with the Commission for Women a Women's History Project. And I was fortunate enough to come in and adopt it, and had the biggest pleasure. For 20 years, we prepared kits for every school in the state, and my family used to laugh at me. I'd come home and say, I just interviewed and met the nicest, most terrific woman, Maryland woman, so I really learned a lot from that. So it was just a pleasure each year. We've focused on a certain area, like women in the arts, women in the suffrage movement, women in law, women in science and medicine. And it just opened my eyes tremendously to the range of contributions that Maryland women have made, past, present, and future.
You have to excuse us a little bit because there is some noise behind us, and that's the crowd coming in for the induction ceremony for the Women's Hall of Fame. Maybe we could talk a little bit more, though, about what do you feel most proud of in the achievements that you've had throughout your life?
I guess the few things, one, the Title IX, being in charge of monitoring the civil rights law that prohibits sex discrimination in education, and I've been doing it for 30 years, the longest serving Title IX coordinator at any state education agency. it's just amazing how many changes Title IX has made in opening areas to girls. It's for boys and girls, but particularly opening career areas for girls. Hillary Clinton has talked about it a lot. She had us at the White House for the 25th anniversary. This is the 40th anniversary of Title IX. And every area, from rights of pregnant students to admissions to different programs, and athletics has gotten so much press that it shows there were more women at the Olympics this year than men for the first time. So the pride in all of those accomplishments, and every school system has a Title IX coordinator who also does things within their own system.
If you had some personal words that you'd like to leave for the young people coming up, now I know you have a grandson, but I know that you have words for him as well as for the young girls coming up.
Yes.
Would there be any words that you would like to share and leave as a legacy?
I think it's true for both boys and girls to be interested in the accomplishments of both men and women and young boys and girls. But Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of concerned, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And I think that if people find what it is that is important to them, to their families, their communities, and to society at large, and to know that we can all do it in any way that we can, and that's the legacy we want to leave.
One of the jewels in your crown is the Maryland Women's Heritage Center, which was a national first.
We were fortunate enough to still be working together on so many things, and Jill and I kind of got it started. She was the original founder, but it has been just a tremendous achievement. We've had so many people come by. Only 15 states have Halls of Fame, and the Hall of Fame is now in the Heritage Center. But I think the other thing is the unsung heroines, that we not only look at Hall of Fame inductees, but we look at all the contributions that women have made from diverse backgrounds in so many areas. And it is just, it's a love and a joy for not only us, but everyone that comes through visiting Maryland seems to really appreciate what the Heritage Center has done.
For all of us, and express a special appreciation to you from everyone who works at the Women's Heritage Center and at the State Department of Education, because you've made a tremendous difference, and I know you will continue to do that.
Thank you.
Wasn't that inspiring? Linda Shevitz has been contributing to Maryland for decades and making a difference in the lives of Maryland women. Thank you for joining us here at the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. Hope you enjoyed the story about Linda Shevitz. Very inspiring. Remember our motto, adding her story to history to tell our story. We'll see you next time on Her Story.